The renewed investigation into a serial killer in central Indiana.
They've been burnt, they've been crushed.
Investigators say they found more remains of a man identified as a victim of suspected serial killer Herb Baumeister.
Herbert Richard Baumeister was born on April 7, 1947 in Indianapolis, Indiana, as the oldest of 4 children to parents Elizabeth and Herbert Baumeister. Initially, Herb had a normal childhood, but as he entered adolescence, he began to change, developing a dark sense of humor and an unusual obsession with urine. Classmates later recalled Herb often expressing curiosity about the taste of urine, and rumors circulated that he had once urinated on his teacher's desk. Another one of his obsessions was dead animals. One day, Herb came across a dead crow in the street. He put it in his book bag and left it on his teacher's desk the next day. The concerned teacher contacted his parents, who arranged for a medical evaluation. It was discovered that Herb had schizophrenia and suffered from multiple personality disorder. Whether he received treatment is unclear, but it seems his parents did not pursue further care. As a result, Herb's classmates began distancing themselves from him, leaving him isolated and spending most of his time at school alone. Although he maintained good grades in high school, he struggled socially. He tried to befriend the football players, but was quickly rejected, ultimately graduating without any friends. Herb attended Indiana University, where he continued to be an outcast and dropped out in his first semester. 2 years later, under pressure from his father, he returned to college. During this time, he met a woman named Juliana Sider. The two began dating after discovering they had a lot in common and shared a mutual dream of starting their own business. In 1971, Herb and Juliana were married, but shortly after he was committed to a mental institution for a few months. Upon his release, his father secured him a job as a copyboy at the Indianapolis Star, a local newspaper. Despite his efforts to fit in, Herb struggled to make friends and eventually quit. He then found employment at the Bureau of Motor Vehicles, where his erratic behavior continued. One year, he sent Christmas cards to his co-workers, featuring a photo of himself and another man dressed in drag, which fueled rumors that Herb was gay. Despite his strained relationship with colleagues, he excelled at his job and was promoted to program director. However, within a year of his promotion, he was fired after sending a letter to Indiana Governor Robert D. Orr that had been urinated on. After being fired, Herb and Juliana started a family, having 3 children over the course of 6 years. While Juliana worked, Herb became a stay-at-home dad as he struggled to find employment. With plenty of free time, he began frequenting gay bars under different aliases and developed a drinking habit. It is believed that Herb began his crime spree around this time, targeting gay men. He would strangle them to death and then dispose of their bodies near Interstate 70. His first known victim was 15-year-old Michael Sean Petrie, who often lingered outside gay bars, engaging in inappropriate activities to make a living. Over the next few years, he claimed 10 more victims ranging in age from 14 to 32. In September 1985, he was charged in a hit-and-run incident while driving drunk. 6 months later, he was arrested for stealing a car, but managed to beat both charges. Herb eventually found a job at a thrift store and saw the potential in owning one himself. Over the next 3 years, he focused on learning the business and then quit his job to pursue his own venture. Borrowing $4,000 from his mother, he opened a thrift store called Save-A-Lot. A percentage of the profits went to the Children's Bureau of Indianapolis, and business quickly took off. Within a year, they made enough profit to open a second store, and after a few years, the Baumeisters became wealthy. In 1988, the family moved to their dream home, an 18-acre horse ranch called Fox Hollow Farms, just outside Indianapolis. Despite their wealth, stress soon followed. Herb began treating his wife differently, often yelling at her for no apparent reason. She gradually distanced herself from the business, but the arguments continued. Herb also stopped maintaining the house, which became increasingly dirty. Oddly, he kept the pool house clean, decorating it with mannequins arranged as if they were attending a party. Over the next several years, Herb and Juliana separated on and off. To escape the turmoil, Juliana and the children would often stay with Herb's mother-in-law, while Herb remained at Fox Hollow Farms to continue running the business. During this period, he shifted his pattern of disposing of bodies, no longer leaving them near the interstate, but instead luring victims to his house where he would kill them and bury them in the woods surrounding the 18-acre property. Herb continued his killing spree, claiming 9 more victims until his 13-year-old son made a disturbing discovery while playing in the woods. He found a human skull. The boy brought it to Juliana, who then confronted Herb. Herb explained that the skull had belonged to his father, an anesthesiologist, who had used it for medical research. He claimed to have found it in the garage and decided to bury it. She believed him. While this was happening, the second store began to fail, and Herb started drinking more during the day. As bills piled up, Herb's wife noticed that her husband was acting stranger with each passing day. While the Baumeisters were trying to fix their family and financial problems, there was an ongoing investigation. Virgil Vandegrift, a highly respected retired sheriff, decided to open a private investigation firm specializing in missing persons cases. In 1994, he was contacted by 2 mothers who reported that their sons were last seen heading to a gay bar. Virgil began posting missing persons posters at gay bars around Indianapolis. Shortly after, he received a call from a publisher of a gay magazine who informed him about the Interstate 70 murders. Convinced that a serial killer was on the loose, Virgil contacted the police, but missing gay men were considered a low priority. Weeks later, Virgil was contacted by a friend of one of the missing men who used the alias Tony. Tony recounted being at a bar when he noticed a man who seemed overly interested in the missing poster of his friend, Roger Goodlett. Tony introduced himself, and the man gave his name as Brian Smart. As they continued to talk, Brian invited Tony to his house. Tony agreed, and they drove to a farm. Tony's description of the property matched Fox Hollow Farm perfectly. Once at the house, they walked to the pool house and sat down. Brian offered Tony a drink, but he declined. At some point, Brian mentioned that he received pleasure from choking people and being choked. He then asked Tony to choke him with a hose while he touched himself. After switching roles, Brian began choking Tony and refused to let go of his neck. Fearing for his life, Tony pretended to pass out. When Tony opened his eyes, Brian seemed startled and quickly drove him back, and they agreed to meet next week. To learn more about Brian, Virgil arranged for Tony and Brian to be followed during their second meeting, but Brian never showed up. Virgil then contacted Mary Wilson, a detective specializing in missing persons cases whom he respected. Mary drove Tony around different neighborhoods, hoping he would recognize the house, but they came up empty-handed. A year later, fate intervened when Tony coincidentally ran into Brian at a bar. This time, Tony was able to get Brian's license plate number and gave it to Mary. Upon further investigation, she discovered that the license plate was registered to Herbert Baumeister. Mary confronted Herb at the store, informing him that he was a suspect in an ongoing investigation and requested permission for investigators to search his home. Herb declined and insisted that any further conversations go through his lawyer. Next, Mary approached Juliana, hoping to persuade her to consent to a search. Although initially shocked by the information, Juliana also declined. Undeterred, Mary requested a search warrant from Hamilton County officials, but her request was rejected due to insufficient evidence. Over the next 6 months, Herb seemed to experience an emotional breakdown. By June, Juliana reached her breaking point when the Children's Bureau terminated its contract with their Save-A-Lot stores, pushing her toward bankruptcy. The haunting image of the skeleton her son had discovered 2 years earlier lingered in her mind, ever since her conversation with Mary. Juliana decided to file for divorce and inform Mary about the skull. She also agreed to allow detectives to search their property. While Herb and their son were visiting his mother at Lake Wawasee, Juliana picked up the phone and called her lawyer. On June 24, 1996, Mary and 3 officers from Hamilton County walked onto the grassy area next to the patio. As they examined the ground, they discovered that the small rocks and pebbles where Herb's children had played were actually bone fragments. Forensic analysis confirmed they were human remains. The following day, police and firefighters began excavation efforts, uncovering bones scattered across the area, even onto neighboring properties. Initial searches found 5,500 bone fragments and teeth, with estimates suggesting the remains belonged to 11 men. though only 4 victims were identified. Roger Goodlett, 34, Stephen Hale, 26, Richard Hamilton, 20, and Manuel Resendez, 31. Juliana's panic intensified as she worried for the safety of her son, who was with Herb. Authorities shared her concern. With Herbert and Juliana in the early stages of divorce, it was decided that before news of the discoveries broke, Herbert would be served with custody papers demanding the return of the son to Juliana. When Baumeister was presented with the papers, he handed him over without incident, dismissing it as a routine legal maneuver. After the news of the bones' discovery was made public, Herb disappeared without a trace. A month later, on July 3, 1996, his body was found in his car at Pinery Park, Ontario, Canada, with a self-inflicted gunshot wound to the head. He left a note attributing his death to his failing marriage and business struggles. Juliana later provided evidence that Herb had traveled along Interstate 70 during the period of the murders, which helped the police connect the dots in the case. Over the years, bone fragments have continued to surface around Fox Hollow Farm. To date, more than 10,000 fragments have been uncovered. The most recent discovery occurred on May 21, 2024, when the remains of Jeffrey Jones, who went missing in 1993, were identified. Fox Hollow Farm was purchased by Rob Graves and his wife in the early 2000s as a way to escape city life. Although they were aware of the murders that had taken place on the property, they felt they could live with the knowledge that a serial killer once lived there and buried bones on the grounds. While residing in the home, the Graves family reported numerous instances of paranormal activity, such as the vacuum being mysteriously unplugged, sightings of a ghost in a red shirt, scratching at doors, strange nightmares, and wood chips flying across the room following loud banging on the door. To this day, the Graves family continues to live on the property and believe that the ghost of Herb Baumeister is behind these unsettling occurrences. The house was later featured on the sci-fi show Paranormal Witness in 2014.
By Armstrong and Grant, dishes to Bison Dele for the dunk.
Brian Carson Williams entered the world on Easter Sunday, April 6, 1996, in Fresno, California, as the second son of Patricia Phillips and singer Eugene Gino Williams Jr. from the musical group The Platters. During Brian's early years, his family accompanied the Platters on their travels until 1970, when his parents went through a divorce. His mother later remarried and they moved to Fresno. Unfortunately, that marriage ended when Brian was in 7th grade. While in high school, he initially pursued track and field until his 10th grade, when a growth spurt catapulted him to a height of 6'8". Brian reluctantly shifted his focus to basketball, despite not enjoying the sport. During his junior year, he played for Bishop Gorman in Las Vegas, but transferred to St. Monica Catholic in Santa Monica, California, for his senior year. At St. Monica, Brian showcased impressive stats, averaging 17.3 points, 12.7 rebounds, 2.1 assists, 2.5 steals, and 9.1 blocks. These outstanding performances led to numerous college offers, and Brian committed to the University of Maryland. In his freshman year, he posted solid numbers, averaging 12.5 points, 6 rebounds, 0.8 assists, 0.6 steals, and 1.2 blocks. Despite a setback with losses in the ACC and NCAA tournaments, Brian decided to redshirt his sophomore year to facilitate a transfer to the University of Arizona. During his junior year at Arizona, Brian contributed with averages of 10.6 points, 5.7 rebounds, 0.4 assists, 0.6 steals, and 1.3 blocks. The team achieved success in the Pac-10 tournament, beating UCLA in the championship game, but faced a disappointing defeat to Alabama in the second round of the NCAA tournament. In his senior year, Brian earned recognition on the All-Pac-12 first team and the All-Region team, achieving career highs in points, steals, and rebounds with averages of 14 points, 7.8 rebounds, 0.6 assists, 0.8 steals, and 1.1 blocks. After an eventful run in the Pac-10 tournament, defeating Oregon in the championship game but falling to Seton Hall in the NCAA tournament, Brian Williams declared for the NBA draft. With the 10th selection in the 1991 NBA draft, the Orlando Magic selected Brian Williams. Despite spending 2 years with the team, Orlando failed to reach the playoffs during both seasons, and Brian averaged 6.85 points, 4.2 rebounds, 0.45 assists, 0.8 steals, and 0.95 blocks. Unhappiness plagued Brian during his time with the Magic, leading to depression and an attempt to overdose on pills. The next year, Brian was traded to the Denver Nuggets in exchange for guard Todd Lichty and forward Anthony Cook. During his initial season in Denver, the team reached the semifinals with contributions from Mahmoud Abdul-Rauf and Dikembe Mutombo, ultimately losing to the Utah Jazz in a 7-game series. The following season, the Nuggets won 41 games but were eliminated in 3 games by the top-seeded San Antonio Spurs. On September 19, 1995, Brian was traded to the Los Angeles Clippers for 7-foot center Elmore Spencer. In what turned out to be his standout year, Brian recorded career-high averages of 15.8 points, 7.6 rebounds, 1.9 assists, 1.1 steals, and 0.8 blocks. Despite his efforts, the Clippers only managed to secure 29 victories. Contract disputes over money led Brian to sign with the defending champions, the Chicago Bulls. During the playoffs, he received increased playing time off the bench and delivered a double-double in a series-clinching game. The Bulls went on to defeat the Utah Jazz in the NBA Finals, making Brian Williams an NBA champion. Close associates of Brian believed that this was the only time he found happiness in the league. However, a mid-flight mental breakdown where Brian attempted to open the plane's doors prompted the Bulls to release him. Brian later signed with the Detroit Pistons. In his second year with the Pistons, he legally changed his name to Bison Dele, honoring his Cherokee and African ancestry. Surprisingly, Bison chose to retire from the NBA before the 1999-2000 season at the age of 30, leaving behind a $36 million contract with the Pistons. Following his retirement, Bison embraced a globe-trotting lifestyle, obtaining a pilot's license and acquiring sailing skills. On July 6, 2002, Bison and his girlfriend, Serena Carlin, set sail from Tahiti aboard Bison's catamaran, the Hakuna Matata, accompanied by skipper Bertrand Saldo. Bison's brother, Miles DeBoard, formerly Kevin Williams, was the only person connected to the voyage that was heard from or seen after July 8, 2002, marking the final satellite phone call. Despite prior regular communication with Banks and family, Bison and Carlin lost contact. On July 20th, Miles returned to Tahiti alone with the boat. On September 6, 2002, a sting operation by Bison's family and friends led to Miles's arrest in Phoenix. Miles had forged Bison's signature to open mailboxes and purchase $152,000 worth of gold using Bison's passport. The Hakuna Matata, registered under an alias, was discovered near Tahiti with its nameplate removed and potential bullet holes patched. Miles assured his mother, Patricia Phillips, he would never harm Bison and couldn't face prison. 2 days later, Miles was found in a Tijuana hotel. The FBI and French authorities joined the investigation, uncovering Miles' $200 purchase of weights, suspected for submerging bodies. They concluded that Bison, Carlin, and Saldo were likely murdered and thrown overboard by Miles, alleging premeditation. Given the likely disposal in the Pacific Ocean, recovering the bodies seemed unlikely. Miles intentionally overdosed on insulin, slipping into a coma, and passed away on September 27, 2002, in a California hospital. His account suggested a dispute with Bison, an accidental death of Carlin, and subsequent killing of Saldo by Bison. However, forensic examination found no evidence supporting this narrative. Miles's story remains uncertain, with inconsistencies such as the weight purchase, disposal of bodies, patched bullet holes, identity theft, and Miles' deliberate insulin overdose instead of cooperation with authorities. After Miles' death, officials did not anticipate to solve the case. A memorial service was held for both brothers. This case remains unsolved.
Hey everyone, my name's Seth Herder, and I'm here to show you a very simple technique to help prevent the glass on your atomizer from your vaporizer from shattering when you drop it.
On March 1, 2021, a Reddit user posed the question, "What is the creepiest or most disturbing internet rabbit hole you've gone down and why?" within the r/Ask Reddit subreddit. A user named Miker95 shared an unsettling experience when purchasing a taser for his brother on Amazon. While reading the product's questions, he came across a question from another Amazon user asking about the effectiveness of a stun gun. Amazon user Seth Herter responded, revealing that he had bought the same stun gun model and, in a moment of self-directed anger, had shocked himself in the face and neck around 30 times. Miker delved into Seth's profile and discovered his reviews on different weapons, sparking further curiosity. Upon exploring Seth's Facebook page, Miker stumbled upon pictures of him holding a katana, the comments labeling him as the devil, and people hoping he rots. Shockingly, it emerged that Seth had taken a life using the same katana he had reviewed. On May 3, 2018, detectives entered a one-bedroom apartment covered in religious imagery. A bulletin board displaying renderings of Jesus and the Virgin Mary alongside handwritten notes, including a list of names of God, EBT card account numbers, and personal debts. In the bathroom, they discovered the lifeless body of 55-year-old Christopher McCarthy, surrounded by blood and Seth's katana nearby. A maintenance worker recounted confronting a jittery Seth earlier that day. The worker tried to investigate Seth's apartment for damage due to him getting multiple noise complaints. Seth told him not today before fleeing to the victim's 2015 Chevrolet Equinox. The next day, police found him covered in blood inside a motel 70 miles away. It later emerged that McCarthy was Seth's ex-boyfriend. He was called over because Seth believed there were people living in his walls and furniture just a day before McCarthy's lifeless body was discovered. Seth had a troubling history of drug abuse and violence. His mother, Margie, argued that Seth was not in control of his actions due to hallucinations and delusions stemming from schizoaffective disorder. On September 20th, 2022, Seth Herter, known as the Samurai Killer, was acquitted of first-degree murder, armed criminal action, and 2 counts of stealing on account of his mental illness. Once free, he was committed to a mental hospital, where he remains to this day.
And is the master of the black t-shirt of Joe Sando. Please welcome from Huntington Beach, California, Joe Sun.
And you said that you were an actor. What do you do with acting?
Joseph Hyungmin Sun was born on November 22, 1970, in Gwangju, South Korea, but moved to Garden Grove, California at an early age. Little is known about his early life, but we do know that in his early 20s, he joined a Christian group and operated in the Huntington Beach area. While he lacked significant martial arts experience, he managed to persuade Art Davies, who was one of the UFC's owners at the time, to include him and Kimo Leopoldo in the UFC lineup. Leopoldo was promoted as a Taekwondo black belt, while Joe Sun was introduced as a Yosondo specialist, a martial art that was made for him.
How did you do in your fighting career?
I lost all my fights. I was in UFC 4.
On December 16, 1994, Joe Sun made his debut at UFC 4. Joe Sun, standing at 5'6", 235 pounds, fought Keith Hackney, who was 5'11 and a half and 200 pounds. In the first round, Joe Sun secured a takedown and performed a guillotine. Hackney was able to break out and proceeded to punch Joe Sun in the balls around 20 times. Hackney then beat Joe Sun by blood choke, eliminating him from the UFC 4 tournament. After the loss, he left to Japan and made his kickboxing debut at K1 Legend 95, where Nobuaki Kakuta, also known as the Bushido Bulldozer, defeated Joe Sun by first-round KO. He also got into acting while fighting from 1993 to 1997. Joe Sun's biggest role was the villain, Random Task, in Austin Powers' International Man of Mystery. Sun was also a professional wrestler in Japan for a short time, wrestling Shinya Hashimoto at All Japan Pro, wrestling's second Wrestle 1 event, and working as singer and dancer for Hustle's third event. Joe Sun then disappeared until 2002. He decided to fight in the infamous Japanese MMA promotion Pride. Joe Sun was defeated by Yusuke Imamura at Pride FC. The best volume won by TKO via elbow injury in 33 seconds. Less than a month later, he flew to Los Angeles to fight in Extreme Pancration 2, where he was beaten so bad that he refused to continue the fight, becoming the first person in MMA history to be listed as submitted by terror. On July 20th, 2002, Joe Sun made a return to Pride. At Pride FC, The Best Volume 2, losing to Jukei Nakajima by TKO via shoulder injury. After this loss, he decided to retire with the MMA record of 0-4.
I lost both fights. I pro wrestled there for a little while.
In May of 2008, Joe Sun kicked in the car door of an ex-roommate. He was arrested and charged with felony vandalism. Joe Sun pled guilty and was given 60 days in jail with probation and a mandatory DNA test. A few months later, he was given an additional 90 days for probation violation due to Joe Sun failing to report his residence to the Department of Probation. When the DNA test results came in, they linked Joe Sun to an unsolved rape from 1990 in Huntington Beach, California, meaning that Joe Sun had a career in MMA and acting while having this dark secret. On Christmas Eve in 1990, a 19-year-old woman was walking her dog when Joe Sun and his accomplice Santiago Gaitan approached her under the pretense of seeking directions. They then hit her in the head with a gun and dragged her into a car. The victim, who does not use her real name for interviews, is quoted as saying that one of the men whispered into her ear something along the lines of, "I'm gonna kill you so bad, I'm gonna throw you off a cliff, I'm gonna mutilate you and throw you." They then took her to another location, where they beat and took turns taking advantage of her for hours. After they were done, Joe Sun told her something along the lines of, "You're lucky it's Christmas," and kicked her out of the vehicle with only a jacket. The woman ran to a nearby house and called the police. In 2009, Santiago Gaitan was arrested, and a year later he pled guilty to multiple sex crimes. He was sentenced to 17 years and 4 months in prison. Shockingly, Joe Sun's initial charges were dropped due to the statute of limitation, but that didn't mean he was let off. He was charged with conspiracy to commit murder and torture. He continued to plead innocent and took it to trial, where he was found guilty. Joe Sun received the sentence of 7 years to life and was sent to Wasco State Prison. But his criminal history doesn't end there. On October 10, 2011, the police went to Joe Sun's cell, where they found his cellmate, Michael Graham, who was in there for failing to register as a sex offender, beaten to death. Joe Sun told the police, "I told you I need to get out of here," and was handcuffed. Sun was taken to solitary confinement, and at his trial in 2017, he was found guilty of voluntary manslaughter. He was given a 27-year sentence. Till this day, Joe Sun is still in prison and will be there for the rest of his life.
You were an actor. What do you do with acting?
I do comedy, play bad guys sometimes. Did you see Austin Powers?